once you get your PhD and you want to get tenure, which means actually getting, a lifetime job, and nobody can really fire you unless you did something really, really bad. But in order to get this tenure, you need to publish. And publishing today has become very competitive. Look, when you write an article...
Was it not competitive before?
Well, it's more competitive now. Because the internet... Look, when you submit an article for publication, you're competing with all the world. You're competing with 1.2 billion Chinese and billions of 1 point something Indians, and it's very competitive. And out of 100 articles that are received by a journal, about 8 are published. And before it's published, it has to go through peer review, which means that there are anonymous professors that are commissioned by the editor-in-chief of a journal. And once they submit their recommendation, the editor-in-chief makes a decision whether to accept your article or to reject it, or usually it's accept with major revisions if it's accepted. And it seems that there are a lot of journals, about 15,000 of them, that are predatory, which means that they work under the disguise of a real peer-reviewed journal. They invite you to submit articles, but they also want money. They say you need to pay $200 or $300 for publication. By the way, with real publications, you don't have to pay. There are two...
So that should be a red flag.
Exactly.
Right there.
Exactly. With real journals, there are two tracks. One is free, and the other one is open access. But you could choose. Open access means that anybody in the world can download your article. And if it's not open access, it means that only if somebody is a student, he or she will have access to the electronic databases of the university, and they'll be able to download your article. I usually don't choose this open access because I think it's too expensive, about $3,000. I don't think it's worth it.
Wait, you're paying for that?
Well, it's no.
Because I thought you said it was free.
No. So if you choose the free track, which I usually choose, then you don't have to pay. But if you choose to have your article accessible to anybody in the world, whether they're a student or not,
that's paid.
Then you have to pay about $2,000 or $3,000, and that goes from your research fund. We all have research.
What
funds.
a racket!
Well, look, these publications, they have to make money somehow. If you choose the free track, then they make money from the subscriptions that universities pay.
Right.
So there are about 15,000 predatory journals, which means that they work under the disguise of a real journal. They invite you to submit publications, and you have no option. You have to pay $200 or $300. And they promise you a very quick review process. They say within 2 or 3 days we make a decision. And that's ridiculous. A real journal, it will take only the editor to look at your article and make a general decision as to whether he or she wants to move it on to the next stage. That will only take about a week. The quickest review process I ever went through was 4 or 5 months. In one case, it took me 2.5 years.
That seems normal. From what I've heard, that seems normal.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, though. Did you hear about the hoax papers?
Hoax papers?
Yeah.
No.
You've never heard about this?
No.
Peter Boghossian and I think Thomas Lindsay. I think is his name, or something. Tom Lindsay, something like that.
Okay.
And Helen Pluckrose. God, I hope I didn't butcher any of those names. But these are 3 academics, intelligent people, from totally different fields and from all over the world. And they published, I think they got, in a span of a couple months, they got like 10 things accepted, 4 published. and basically they were all bullshit. All of them were bullshit. And the premise behind them was to test the academic journal's integrity, really. Okay. It was they said, like, we're going to publish our results. We're going to show people what it is that we did and what was published and what wasn't, and the research that they published was totally insane. It was women's studies and not that women's studies is insane.
It must have been one of these predatory journals. It couldn't be a real journal.
No, these were legitimate journals.
Really?
Yes, these were legitimate journals.
All right.
And I'll send you this later because it's wild. And the whole thing that happened was that when they got their edits back, it made their work crazier.
Okay.
Like one of the things that they published was they took a excerpts from Mein Kampf, and they substituted like Jews for women and men and white man and things like that, and it was published. Like that was accepted. I mean, like really nuts.
Okay, well, you have to distinguish between. There are 4 different categories of journals. The Q1 are the top journals. Q2 are also okay. But then there are Q3 and Q4 journals, which are really low quality.
So what is all this?
You publish...
What is the Q rating?
It's okay. So it means quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4.
Okay.
So the first 2 quarters, Q1 and Q2 are the best journals to publish in.
Really?
And if you publish in them, you will get promotion. If you publish in Q3 or Q4 journals, it will not be recognized, and you will not get promotion based on them. So it probably was a Q4 journal because again, it's low quality. I mean, it's not considered to be a very high quality journal.
It's low quality just because it was published later in the year.
No, it's not. Q1 doesn't mean quarter 1 of the year. It means it's
the level, like a quality. Okay,
yeah, the quality exactly. So Q4 was probably a journal that the reviewers are probably fresh PhD students or people who are just
I mean, I'm going to send this to you, and I'd love to hear back from you about what, because they put everything online. They put everything that they, eventually they were caught out. And Peter Boghossian, who at the time was in the philosophy department in Portland, I believe, was brought up on academic charges for falsifying data.
Oh my God.
And it was like, well, that was the point. That you guys didn't catch it. Like, that was the whole point. Now you're like taking it out on me because you didn't do your job. So it's like, basically a cover up.
Exactly. There are different reviewers. I mean, reviewers, there are some reviewers who are more serious and some who are a little bit more reckless. And that's why editors today, especially in, if we're talking about top journals, they make sure they choose reviewers who are serious, those who have reputation in their fields, and that they know that they will give them serious feedback.
Right.
By the way, if you remember, we mentioned the predatory journals.
Yeah.
I would love to test this, but I'm sure that if I write an article, which will be complete BS, and I say that it's an experiment where I interviewed aliens and I compared the attitudes of aliens from Mars and Venus, I don't know. I'm not sure anybody will read it.
You think it'll pass?
I think so. They'll say, give us $200 and wow, it was great article.
I think that would be a great experiment right there.
Right?
I think you should do it. I mean, can you imagine like what people will say afterward? Like that would be fantastic.
It's really a shame. I mean, these predatory journals, they take money from researchers, but they give you nothing in return. You cannot be promoted based on it.
Right.
And remember, I mentioned this earlier on, a real journal accepts, I don't know, maybe a year, 40, 50 articles. Predatory journal will accept and publish about 50 a month. Multiply that by $200 or $300, and you can see how much money they make off naive PhD students or fresh PhD graduates. It's really unfortunate.
That's so sad. Do you talk about this in the university?
Yes.
So how do people keep falling for this?
Well, I've only started talking to this with my students a couple of years ago. I'm not sure all lecturers do this, but we have a course called scientific writing or academic writing, and I make sure that the lecturers in my department make students aware of the fact that there are predatory journals and how to screen them out while searching Google Scholar.
How do you screen them out then? Like just by the sheer number of volume that they put out? Is that
no? Well, I did this with my students last Sunday. I just went to Google. I entered Google Scholar with them, and I typed in some keyword, and we looked at the results. And I told them, "Look, you see, this result is a result from a well-known publisher. So this is kosher. This is good. This one looks like something that has nothing to do with any publisher. Maybe some university. We're not sure. Screen it out." Because even if an article was published on the website of a university, it does not mean that it was peer-reviewed. Therefore, I do not use it in my references in my research. Only if articles that were published in top well-known publishers' websites.
So what does that mean in terms of like gatekeeping too, though? Because that's kind of an issue, right? Like, because it could be a kosher website that maybe just doesn't look it by your standard. Because is that really the only way to just say, hey, the format's off, don't trust it, No,
well, I check things. I check it. First of all, I look at if they say something about how long the review process takes. If they say that it takes 2 or 3 days or a couple of weeks, that's a red flag. If they ask for money and you don't have a free track, that's a red flag. If they tell you that you need to submit by the end of the month and this will be published in a particular volume and issue of an article of a journal, that's a red flag. Because when you publish in a kosher journal, they don't know when it's going to be published.
Right.
So they don't say, submit articles that will be published in this and that volume. So these are red flags. So if you see it, avoid it.
That's so wild. But how many people do you know who have fallen prey to this?
I suspect that a few of the people I know from different places in Israel have fallen victim to this, unfortunately.
Like people at the university that you work with, colleagues of yours, you think, as well?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And, it's not only the way the website looks. Like I mentioned, there are lots of red flags.
Right.
But they also tend to mention all sorts of weird statistics that you will not see in a legit journal.
Weird.
For example, how many people visited the web page in general and in the last week and from which countries.
Like, who cares?
Yeah, all sorts of stuff that are presumably there to impress you, but in a legit journal, they're not going to be there.
Like, they're not trying to impress you. They don't care.
Yeah, and by the way, exactly. And by the way, there's another thing. Legit journals require that you submit through a submission window. Okay, it's a specific platform. If it's a predatory journal, they just say, email your manuscript to the editor. So anonymity is not guaranteed, and this is something that should be guaranteed. I mean, usually journals...
The anonymity of the researcher?
Yes, especially for the reviewers. The reviewers should not know. It's usually a double blind system.
Right.
It means that you don't know who the reviewer is, and the reviewer doesn't know who you are.
Right.
So it means that the assessment is purely professional, based on science.
Right.
And it's really concerning. There are 15,000 predatory journals out there.
15,000?
And I even heard stories where they take, every journal has to have an editorial board, which is actually the reviewers of the journal.
Right.
And I read about cases where they took the names of well-known, renowned professors and they just added them to the editorial board without their consent.
Ooh.
Just to look... rather prestigious.
How do you catch that, or you don't, really?
You can. Well, if you just Google a name, you can catch it. I can tell you that there is one journal that is using my name.
Really?
I've contacted them. I even threatened them that, I would go get a lawyer.
And did they take you down?
Nothing.
Nothing?
I did it several times. They just ignored me. I even sent an email to the editor through the email that they publish. That if you want to submit an article, submit it directly to the editor. No response. They couldn't care less. And there's really nothing you can do.
Do they use, false names, too? Am I a professor somewhere?
Could be. I haven't checked. Could be.
Oh, gosh. So, just so you guys know, if you see Professor Aaron Poris somewhere, run away. Run away.
No, because, they have to fill their editorial board with people. I mean, otherwise, nobody will fall into this trap.
That's so scary.
So either they put people who are, new PhDs who really don't understand the meaning of this, or it could be just they locate names and they just put them there.
Right.
So you should really, if you're a PhD student, don't waste your article. If you publish an article in a predatory journal, it's burned. You can't publish it anywhere else because it has been published.
Oh, wow. So that's that's years of your life down the drain too.
Exactly. Because if I have an article that was published with a predatory journal, and now I submit it to a legit journal, they will run a scan of the internet. There are lots of programs. They use it. They want to make sure that you haven't copied. There's no plagiarism.
Right.
And if they find it, they couldn't care less where it was published, legit or not legit. They would say, your publication was published, and you're trying to publish it again, and they might even sanction you for 3 years.
Oh my God!
Exactly. If you're accused of plagiarism, you'll be sanctioned for 3 years.
Plagiarizing yourself too.
Exactly.
Oh no.
Exactly. If I mention a study that I've published a few years ago, I have to say a study by Abraham, 2018, for example. Otherwise, I'm copying things for myself, which is not legal.
Oh my God.
No, actually, it's not legal because it's considered plagiarism because once an article has been published, you give up your copyrights. So the copyright goes to the journal. So since it's not your article anymore, really, because you gave up your copyrights, you have to cite yourself.
Wow. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. But like, the idea that a journal that is false can burn you that way, that is so frustrating.
Burn you, and also take a few $100s from you. No. It's just unbelievable.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. But fortunately...
Do you know, like, Israeli publications that are false like that?
I'm not aware of that, no. But fortunately, there is a list, I think it's called Bell's Predatory... list of predatory journals. Anybody can find it online. And if you suspect that that the journal is predatory, you can just see whether it's there. And if it's even suspected, avoid it.